The live feed had been running in the background of Ethan Wu's office for nearly an hour, the volume low, the visuals mostly ignored until it wasn't. He had clicked into the gala out of habit more than interest, a charity broadcast from a local foundation, supporting families in need. His company had made a minor donation enough to warrant his name on a list somewhere, but nothing that required his attention. Yet something, or rather someone on the screen, snapped his entire focus into place. A woman seated near the back of the audience, her posture hunched, her eyes fixed downward, her hand gently resting on the back of a small boy seated next to her. Then another child climbed into her lap. Then a third tugged at her sleeve. And just like that, Ethan Wu stopped breathing. It wasn't the woman alone that punched a hole through his chest. It was the three boys beside her. Boys with warm brown skin and unmistakable green eyes. His eyes. The kind of green that didn't just skip generations. The kind of green that made people pause and ask, are those real? Ethan had only ever seen that color in a mirror. And once years ago reflected back at him in a pair of tear-filled eyes belonging to Monica Bell. He stood slowly as if his legs weren't sure they could carry what his mind had just realized. Monica. It had been 5 years since she vanished. No goodbye, no angry texts, just silence. One moment they were inseparable, sneaking away from his cramped, shared office to steal lunches in the park, and the next her phone was disconnected. Her apartment cleared out. Her email returned undeliverable. She disappeared like vapor from a warm cup of coffee. At the time, Ethan was barely scraping by, trying to pitch his AI software to investors who couldn't see past his last name. But now he was the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company with global clients and staff in 3 countries. And yet none of that meant a thing compared to the shock sitting in his chest as he stared at the screen. Those boys, they weren't just similar, they were identical. One of them even tilted his head while listening in the same exact way Ethan did when deep in thought. It was uncanny. It was devastating. He dropped into his desk chair like the air had been pulled out from the room. Could it be? Could she have left because she was pregnant? Pregnant with his children. The camera panned away, moving to the next segment of the gala, but Ethan had already screen captured the moment, zooming in, enhancing staring. The resemblance was brutal. Not imagined, not wishful thinking. Real. Within the hour, he was inside his company's secure prototype lab, unlocking a private version of the AI platform he had spent years building. It wasn't just built to predict buying patterns or flag anomalies in code. This version's Sentinel was designed to track digital fingerprints, to connect financial records, social posts, metadata trails across platforms. It was powerful, dangerous even. But Ethan didn't hesitate. He keyed in a single name, Monica Bell. The search lit up. There she was. Address Renton, Washington. Occupation freelance photo editor. Married to Preston Carter, senior partner at Carter & Rowe, LLP. Ethan felt a wave of nausea. Preston Carter, the same man who once made a condescending remark about Ethan during a panel on tech ethics. Of course. He clicked deeper. Monica had no open bank accounts under her name. No utilities. No car registration. Everything was in Preston's name. Every trace of financial independence wiped clean. Every account, every transaction controlled. And then came the photos. Vacation snapshots posted on Preston's firm's Instagram. Dinners, birthday parties, awards, a golden image of the perfect blended family. Me and my boys Preston had captioned one. Ethan stared at the screen, heart pounding. His boys. A tight pain bloomed behind his ribs. He didn't know their names, had never heard them cry or laugh, never kissed a scraped knee or read a bedtime story. 5 years. 5 whole years. And yet, they were alive. They were beautiful. And they were out there just a short drive away. Ethan closed his laptop, picked up his keys, and walked out of his office without a word. He didn't know what he was going to say, but he knew one thing for certain: he was going to find Monica. And this time she wouldn't disappear without answers. The next day, Ethan drove to Renton with a heart pounding harder than any boardroom pitch or investor call ever had. The address listed under Monica's name led him to a modest townhouse complex tucked between a quiet elementary school and a chain-link fenced soccer field. It was the kind of place where front doors didn't have smart locks, and the kids rode second-hand bikes with squeaky brakes and sticker-covered helmets. He didn't knock. Not yet. Instead, he waited in his car across the street watching. For 2 hours, he sat with his thoughts, memories surfacing like old photographs. Monica dancing barefoot in the kitchen, her laughter bouncing off the walls of his apartment. The way she always talked to plants like they were people. The way she used to curl into him during thunderstorms. Just past 3:00 p.m., he saw them. 3 boys emerged from the townhouse, backpacks, bouncing sneakers, kicking gravel. Monica followed close behind, her hand protectively guiding the youngest as they crossed toward the nearby park. She looked thinner than he remembered, her jeans faded at the knees, her hoodie stretched at the sleeves. Her hair was tied up carelessly, her steps brisk but careful. Motherhood suited her, and it also weighed on her like a coat she hadn't taken off in 5 years. Ethan followed them at a distance, staying just out of sight behind a cluster of trees at the edge of the playground. He didn't mean to spy, not really. He just couldn't interrupt yet. The boys laughed, tossed a ball back and forth, took turns on the swings, and in the middle of it all, Monica sat quietly on a bench, eyes trained on them like a soldier on watch. One of the boys tripped and scraped his knee. Ethan flinched instinctively, wanting to run to him, but Monica was already there, wiping the dirt away, kissing the bruise. The boy leaned into her. She smiled softly. Ethan's chest ached. Then she looked up and froze. Her eyes locked onto his, confusion, flashing first, then disbelief, then something else, fear maybe. She stood abruptly, calling the boys to her side. They obeyed, forming a tight triangle around her like instinct. Ethan stepped forward slowly, hands, visible, voice low. "Monica," he said. She didn't speak. Her eyes flicked behind him, around them, as if waiting for someone else to emerge. When no one did, her body relaxed slightly, but only slightly. "I saw you yesterday," he continued. "On the live stream." A beat passed. 2. Then 3 words left her lips, hoarse, quiet, not a greeting, but a statement. "You shouldn't be here." "I had to be," Ethan replied, swallowing hard. "I saw them. I saw me." The oldest boy looked up, puzzled. "Mom, who is he?" Monica pressed her lips together, but her hand trembled where it rested on the boy's shoulder. Ethan looked at her silently, pleading. Finally, she exhaled and whispered, He's someone I used to know." "No," Ethan said gently but firmly. "I'm someone you loved, someone you left, and someone who deserved to know he had children." Her face crumpled then, just for a second, before she forced it back into a mask of composure. "Not here," she said. "Not in front of them?" Ethan nodded. "Then let's walk." She hesitated, then signaled the boys toward the slide. "Stay where I can see you," she warned, voice taut. They began to walk slowly, just a few steps away from the playground. Monica didn't look at him. "You think I wanted this?" she whispered. "You think I planned to disappear, to raise them like this? Then why did you?" Ethan asked, the pain sharp in his throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" She stopped, closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was no more anger, only exhaustion. "Because someone told me you wouldn't be there, that you were too focused, too selfish, that I'd ruin your life if I stayed." "Who told you that?" he demanded. Monica glanced back at the kids, then at him, and then she said the name he already feared. Preston. The syllables hit like a blow to the chest. Ethan didn't speak. He just stood there, staring at the woman he once loved and the mother of the children he never got to meet, wondering how much more of his life had been stolen by a man he barely knew. Ethan didn't remember the drive home. His hands had stayed on the wheel, his eyes on the road, but his mind was nowhere near the traffic. It was still at that park, still watching Monica's face twist in quiet guilt, still hearing her whisper a name that suddenly meant more than it ever should have: Preston. That night he sat alone in his living room, the city lights outside his penthouse window, blinking like indifferent stars. In front of him, his laptop was open, a blank document glowing white. But his focus was on a different screen, an encrypted interface few people even knew existed. Sentinel. The AI platform his company had spent years refining had originally been built to detect consumer behavior patterns and fraud tools for investors and data analysts. But Ethan had trained a private version to do more, to connect fragments of public and semi-private information, images, timestamps, metadata, financial transactions. It wasn't about breaking laws. It was about illuminating what people worked hard to hide. He typed in two names, Preston Carter and Monica Bell. The results began to flow within minutes. He learned that Monica had no credit cards in her name, no registered property, no bank accounts with her listed as the primary holder. All utilities, medical records, and even her children's school documents were tied to Preston. Then came the social data. Photos of Preston smiling beside the boy's arms around their shoulders, all captioned with phrases like, "My son's fatherhood is everything, and being a dad is the greatest honor of my life." Posts flooded with likes, praise, admiration from peers in the legal field. Ethan stared at one post in particular, Preston holding the youngest child, the boy clutching a teddy bear. The caption read, "Rescued from abandonment. Now safe. Now mine." The AI flagged something next a series of high-value life insurance policies, each taken out under Preston's name. 3 of them. $500,000 each. Beneficiary Preston Carter. Ethan froze. The boys were all healthy. No medical issues. The premiums were high and unnecessary unless someone was anticipating a financial payout. He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. This wasn't just emotional theft. This was a network of legal manipulation power dynamics, and if that insurance meant what he feared, a potential threat to his children's safety, he dove deeper. Sentinel pulled archived email logs scraped from Preston's old work domain. The AI unearthed messages to a former colleague. One thread stood out. "She doesn't know how to manage anything. No income, no leverage. That's the point. If he ever shows up, I've got a plan in place. Legal wall. Custody narrative. I'll bury him." Ethan exhaled slowly. His chest felt tight, but not from panic, from fury. He wasn't just cut out of his children's lives. He had been erased, rewritten out of the story so someone else could play hero. And Monica, she hadn't just been hiding. She had been cornered. He needed help, not just legal help. Someone who had fought cases like this and won. Someone who could go up against a man like Preston and not blink. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Ethan Wu came the voice on the other end, crisp and cautious. "Alicia Grant," he replied. "You once said if I ever faced a real war to call you." There was a pause, then a slight chuckle. "So, it's war now." He looked back at the screen, at the children he'd never held, at the lies someone else was profiting from. "It is," Ethan said. "And I have proof. I just need help making it public." "Well then," Alicia said, her voice sharpening like a blade being drawn, "let's burn his empire to the ground." Alicia Grant didn't waste time with small talk. Within 24 hours, she was seated across from Ethan in his office, her blazer still sharp from court, her laptop already open. She was exactly as he remembered, precise, unflinching, and absolutely allergic to bullshit. He slid a drive across the table. "Everything Sentinel pulled," he said. "Emails, insurance records, property bank access, even flagged search histories." Alicia plugged it in her eyes, scanning the data with a speed that came from years of reading through lies dressed in legal language. "Jesus," she muttered after a few minutes. "This isn't custody manipulation. This is systematic isolation, financial captivity, psychological coercion." Ethan watched her closely. "You think we have a case?" She turned the screen toward him. "We don't just have a case. We have a blueprint of how he built an entire persona on top of your children." That phrase hit hard. Your children. Not theoretical, not abstract, real. Breathing, growing up a few miles away while a stranger wore the title of dad. Alicia tapped her finger on one section of the screen. "Here, this clause in the power of attorney Monica signed gives Preston total financial authority. And this, he renewed her car registration in his name. Her phone bill is tied to his corporate card. She's not just under his roof, she's under surveillance." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And she doesn't even know." "Maybe not all of it," Alicia said carefully. "But I'll bet she feels it. That kind of control leaves bruises even if they don't show." Ethan stood pacing. "I need to get my kids back. I need the truth out there. But if we hit him directly, he'll spin it. Make her look unstable. Make me look vindictive." "Exactly," Alicia said. "Which is why we don't go after him in court first." He paused, then where a slow, almost dangerous smile curled at the edge of her mouth. "In public. where he's weakest, where the mask matters. She outlined the plan, a timed release of evidence coordinated with trusted journalists and legal organizations. Not as a scandal, but as a case study, a deep dive expose on power abuse in family law featuring Preston as the cautionary tale. People already see him as a hero, Alicia said. So when the truth hits, it'll break harder. He's leveraged your kids for status, for media praise, for his image as the good man who stepped in. We're going to turn that narrative inside out. Ethan nodded slowly, the wheels turning. What about Monica? If this explodes, she'll be in the middle of it. I've handled worse, Alicia replied. But more importantly, you need to talk to her. Let her know this isn't just revenge. This is reclaiming something that was stolen. That evening, Ethan drove back to Renton. The boys were outside riding scooters up and down the narrow sidewalk, their laughter bright against the soft dusk. Monica stood by the porch, arms crossed, watching them the way she always did, part mother, part guardian, part prisoner. She saw him coming and didn't move. No surprise this time, just weariness. I talked to a lawyer, Ethan said simply. She sighed. Of course you did. I'm not here to drag you through a courtroom, he added quickly. But you need to know he didn't just keep me from them. He built a system to control you. Her arms tightened across her chest. What are you talking about, your accounts? Your documents, the insurance policies, the emails? Monica, he's not just overprotective, he's dangerous. She looked away, jaw tight. You don't know what it's like, she said quietly. Being told you're nothing without him, that no one will believe you, that leaving would ruin everything. Ethan stepped closer, his voice soft. You're not nothing, and you're not alone anymore. She blinked fast, looked at the boys, then back at him. I want to be their father, he said. Not just biologically, not just legally, presently, but I won't do it without you. Her silence stretched for a long, loaded moment, and then just barely she nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first brick in something new. It started with a spreadsheet. Alicia called it the paper trail of power. It was color-coded, cross-referenced, and terrifying. Every transfer, every policy, every digital breadcrumb Preston had left behind was laid out in painful clarity. Monica sat beside Ethan in his office, staring at it with silent disbelief, her fingers trembling just above the touchpad. I didn't know, she whispered, voice cracking. I thought I had agreed to help him stabilize things. Keep the boys protected. I didn't know he'd lock me out of my own life. Ethan placed a hand over hers, steady but careful. You trusted him. That's not a crime. But letting him keep control now, that's something we can change. Alicia handed Monica a slim folder. This is a full financial separation plan. New bank account, new phone line, new representation. Once we file this, you're not under his legal shadow anymore. Monica looked up. He'll come after me. No, Alicia said. He'll try. But not when we shine a floodlight on him first. And that's exactly what they did. 3 days later, while Preston Carter stood on stage at a local law conference giving a speech about ethical fatherhood, Ethan quietly sent a digital dossier to over 50 targeted recipients, journalists, bar association investigators, nonprofit legal watchdogs, and 3 high-profile parenting bloggers. The email subject line was simple. The other side of Preston Carter. Within hours, inboxes lit up. The documents weren't just damning, they were airtight. Screenshots of manipulative emails, insurance policies, memos detailing how to preserve the narrative of abandonment, a legally binding clause hidden in a prenup, giving Preston unilateral decision-making power over Monica's medical and financial choices. By evening, hashtags were trending. False father, Jashan financial captivity. Let mothers. Choose news outlets began calling. Ethan didn't respond. Neither did Monica. That was part of the strategy. Let the story grow without their voices, then land the truth when people were listening. The next day, a new headline emerged. Hero Dad or Legal Manipulator, the Preston Carter Scandal. A well-respected investigative journalist dropped a full expose featuring not just the documents, but anonymous testimony from 2 of Preston's former interns, both of whom had overheard him brag about rebranding a broken woman and stolen kids. Preston tried to issue a public denial. He held a press conference flanked by his firm's partners. But the damage had already rooted deep. As reporters bombarded him with pointed questions, one woman in the crowd stood and called out, "Do the kids even know who their real father is?" He had no answer. That same afternoon, the board of the Family Values Foundation suspended Preston's involvement pending investigation. His firm quietly took down all promotional materials featuring him. Emails leaked showing internal panic. The narrative he'd spent 5 years building collapsed in less than 48 hours. And still Ethan remained silent. He wasn't after humiliation. He was after enough space for the truth to live again. On Saturday, Monica met Ethan at a small downtown cafe. Her face looked different, tired, yes, but something else too. Lighter, like a window cracked open after too many winters closed. "He called," she said quietly, screamed, threatened, said I betrayed him. Ethan stirred his coffee. "And did you feel like you had?" She shook her head. "I felt free." He looked at her for a long moment. "What do you want, Monica?" "After all this," she smiled faintly, eyes misting, "I want to raise our kids, not as yours or mine, but ours. No shadows, no secrets, just truth." Ethan reached into his coat pocket and slid a photo across the table. It was from the park one Alicia had taken quietly. The boys playing, Monica watching. Ethan crouched nearby, tying a shoe. "This is what I want too," he said. And for the first time since this all began, Monica didn't look afraid. She looked ready. The joint custody hearing didn't make headlines. It wasn't televised. There were no reporters waiting outside, no dramatic objections or slamming gavels. Just a quiet courtroom, a sympathetic judge, and 3 little boys coloring quietly in the corner, unaware that their lives were quietly, irrevocably changing. Monica sat beside Ethan at the long wooden table, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She hadn't worn makeup, no designer suit. Just a simple blouse and the quiet kind of dignity that doesn't ask for attention, but commands it anyway. Ethan, in a gray sweater instead of a blazer, looked less like a CEO and more like a man who had finally understood what it meant to fight for something bigger than himself. Preston didn't show up. His lawyer submitted a signed document agreeing to relinquish all custodial rights, citing public pressure and ongoing professional considerations. It was the most sanitized version of defeat Ethan had ever read, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was when the judge looked over her glasses and said, "This court recognizes Ethan Wu as the legal and biological father of the minors in question and awards joint custody between Mr. Wu and Ms. Bell effective immediately." It was done. On the courthouse steps, Monica turned to him. "You know this isn't the end, right?" she said gently. "They'll have questions about him, about us, about everything." "I'll tell them the truth," Ethan said, "at their pace, in their time." She nodded slowly. "That's all I ever wanted." That weekend, they took the boys to the Seattle Aquarium. It wasn't fancy, just a Saturday outing with juice boxes, hand sanitizer, and 3 kids who refused to walk in straight lines. But for Ethan, it was something more. It was his first real memory as a father. Not a title on paper, not a name on a birth certificate. A moment, a real one. The middle child, Levi, tugged on his sleeve at one point and whispered, "Are you really my dad?" Ethan bent down, looked him in the eye. "I really am, and I always will be." Levi nodded seriously like he was making a mental note. "Okay, but you still have to learn how to braid hair. Mom's not good at it." That night, Ethan stood in the kitchen of Monica's townhouse, still hers though she was considering moving. He poured juice while the boys fought over Lego pieces in the living room. Monica leaned against the fridge, arms folded, watching him with a soft amusement in her eyes. "I never imagined this," she said. Ethan glanced at her. "What, me here, pretending I know how to divide juice into thirds?" "No," she smiled. "You laughing in my kitchen like nothing ever broke between us?" He set the pitcher down and walked over slowly. "It did break," he said quietly, "but we're still here." She looked at him, eyes warm and wet. "I don't need perfect," she whispered. "I just need honest." He nodded. "Then you'll always have that." A few days later, a follow-up article ran quietly in a Sunday morning publication, "From Silence to Custody, How One Father Reclaimed His Place." It wasn't viral. It wasn't explosive. but it reached the people it needed to. Ethan received emails from other fathers from mothers, afraid to leave controlling relationships, from lawyers who said they'd start looking closer at the language in contracts that once seemed harmless. One message simply read, "Because of your story, I finally called my sister. She's been isolated for 3 years. Thank you." Ethan didn't respond to them all. He couldn't, but he read every single one. And with each word, each voice, each crack in someone else's silence, he felt something inside him mend a little more. This wasn't just a win, it was a beginning. 6 months later, the townhouse was empty. Monica had finally moved, trading the narrow walls and shadowed memories for a quiet house near Green Lake, with a backyard big enough for 3 boys to turn into a battlefield of Nerf wars and treehouse plans. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like air, open light, and theirs. Ethan had helped paint the bedrooms. He'd spent whole weekends figuring out which bike was too small, which books made the kids laugh, and which snack mysteriously disappeared within minutes of grocery day. He hadn't moved in, not officially, but he was there for breakfast more often than not. Sometimes he slept on the couch after story time. Sometimes Monica fell asleep beside him. There were no labels, no pressure, just rebuilding. That afternoon, the boys were in the backyard when Ethan arrived with takeout and a new soccer ball. As he stepped through the gate, the youngest ran up, face flushed and messy-haired. "Dad," he shouted. "I scored twice." Ethan laughed, scooping him up. "You better teach me your secret then, because your mom still beats me at every game." Monica leaned against the doorframe, holding 2 lemonades and watching with that same small smile she wore now, more often than not. There were still bad days, moments when Preston's voice returned in her head, full of control and guilt. But they were fading, slowly, quietly, like echoes in an empty room. Later that evening, over paper plates and grilled cheese, Levi, the serious one, looked up at Ethan and asked, "Why did Mr. Preston say you weren't our dad?" The table went still. Ethan set down his cup, his voice steady. "Because sometimes people want something that doesn't belong to them, and instead of asking, they take it. And to make it feel okay, they tell stories that aren't true." Levi blinked, processing. But he didn't have to lie. "No," Ethan said. He didn't. Monica reached out, brushing Levi's hair. "And now you know the truth. That matters more than anything." After dinner, as dusk stretched long across the lawn, Ethan pushed the kids on the tire swing one by one. He didn't think about the years he'd lost. Not right now. He only thought about this, the sound of his son's laughter splitting the air, the way Monica looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. The fact that when bedtime came, 3 little voices would ask if he was staying tonight. The next week, a small news segment aired. A follow-up story, quiet and respectful, highlighting the rise in legal support for parents wrongfully removed from their children's lives. Alicia Grant had become a name people recognized. Ethan was mentioned briefly, not for drama, but for his patience, his restraint, his commitment to building instead of destroying. Preston Carter, meanwhile, had relocated. Word was he was working at a small firm in another state. His reputation had never recovered, and his ex-partners had quietly severed ties. The world hadn't crucified him. It had simply forgotten him. Let his story fade like the lie it always was. And Ethan, he was still building, just not the kind of empire he used to chase. One morning, as he packed lunches and tied sneakers, the middle child grinned up at him and said, "You're way better than Mr. Preston." Ethan smiled, tousling his hair. "I'm just your dad. That's enough for me." Later that day, as the boys disappeared through the school doors, and Monica stood beside him in the cool morning air, she slipped her hand into his without saying a word. He squeezed it gently. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't taking someone down, it's building something so whole, so honest, so deeply rooted in love that their lies simply don't matter anymore. If this story moved you or reminded you of the quiet strength it takes to rebuild what was stolen, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest victory is simply living in truth.